Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman here in our Northwest Side studio.
And I'm Paris Schutz reporting from Chicago's greater Englewood area.
On the show tonight.
This is an historic opportunity to build Chicago's first casino.
The mayor begins the bidding process for the city's first casino, what she wants developers to keep in mind.
So it's a long way to go in the next 10 years.
Most cars and buses on the roads now are powered by gas and diesel, but new policies are giving the green light to electric vehicles.
It's very key to the survival of the community.
As Chicago enters what could be a third wave, COVID vaccinations in the greater Englewood area lag behind the city. We check in with community leaders working to change that.
This is a pivotal moment in history, and all I can think about is Emmett Till.
How George Floyd's death and the murder trial that followed sparked a revisiting of Emmett Till's story. Scientists inject monkey embryos with human stem cells, sparking fears of human-monkey hybrids. We go behind the headlines to understand the science. How a CTA train bridge tells the story of the South Side's development in this week's Ask Jeffrey.
They give new vision to culture.
And a Greektown art exhibit combines mythology and current events.
And Brandis, as you mentioned, I'm in Englewood on the city's south side. It's a community that has lagged behind the city average in terms of vaccination rates, and it is also a community that has been hit hard over the last year by COVID. We'll have more on exactly why that is and what local and city officials are doing to change it. But first, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, thank you. And now to some of today's top stories. A turning point in the race to access the COVID-19 vaccine.
4 months now, we've been saying it's coming. Soon you are going to be able to find a vaccine if you want a vaccine. But our supply has just not been up to our demand month after month after month. And I know how frustrating that has been for many people. But as of now, we have enough vaccine. Yay! Yay!
During her weekly Ask the Doctor social media segment, Chicago Public Health Commissioner Dr. Allison Arwoody said, despite the pause in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the city has enough doses to vaccinate any Chicagoan 16 years old and over. And starting tomorrow, city-run sites will begin accepting walk-ins. Appointments, though, can still be found using ZocDoc. For more on accessing the vaccine for 16 and 17-year-olds in particular, please visit our website. Meanwhile, state health officials say another 3,100 people have been diagnosed with the coronavirus and 33 have died. A total of 1.312 million people have tested positive since the start of the pandemic, and 21,755 people have died. So far, 28% of the state's population has been fully vaccinated. The city is doubling down on its plans to establish a casino in Chicago, officially soliciting proposals for not just a casino, but a casino resort. Proposals must include plans for a 500-room hotel, meeting space, restaurants, bars, and entertainment venues to create. City projections estimate the casino will ring up $200 million in annual revenue, which is already earmarked for the Chicago's underfunded police and fire pension funds. The casino wouldn't open until around 2025, and we will have more on this proposal coming up later on in the broadcast. To this point, Chicago officials report nearly half of all residents receiving a first-dose vaccine and around a quarter fully vaccinated. Those numbers are expected to increase faster as the city has now announced those walk-in appointments. However, some communities have lagged behind in their vaccination rates. One of those is Englewood on the city's south side. It has also struggled with a high rate of COVID and with historic disinvestment and violence. Paris Schutz and producer Marissa Nelson have been reporting in Englewood today as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Paris joins us now right outside Kennedy King College. Paris.
Yeah, Brandis, those walk-in appointments and the announcement of that certainly welcome news here in Englewood as it is across the city, but it also means there will be more vaccines, we're told, shipped to Englewood and other underserved areas. And as you mentioned, Englewood has lagged behind in vaccination rate. There's a myriad reasons for that, but according to the latest statistics, so far about 22% of the population in this zip code has received its first dose, only 14% fully vaccinated, which is why the Protect Chicago Plus program has come in here to do things like mobile vaccination units, outreach, and distribution to community health centers. The Chicago Deputy Mayor Sybil Madison says the numbers have gone up about a fifth since February 6th.
We have to make it super convenient for people to get vaccinated. So we're beginning to look at walk-ups instead of requiring appointments now that we have so much supply. We're trying to bring the vaccine to people. So we've done a little bit of work with the vaccine bus and bringing it through Englewood. So we're excited about being able to try some new strategies so that we can make vaccine available in that moment that someone decides that they want to get vaccinated.
Part of the strategy all along is to distribute it to local community health centers like Miles Square. That's operated by the University of Illinois hospitals. Doctors there say they'll complete their 4,000th vaccination in the community this week. But they say that it's been a challenge to reach out to community members, many without access to technology, mainly because community members say COVID is a challenge, but not as great a challenge as some of the other things we face on a day-to-day basis.
On the street, they're more afraid of getting shot at than actually getting COVID. And so what's front of mind, I think, is something we need to keep in mind as to what's the value add and what's the incentive or the importance of actually understanding the disease, getting a vaccine, when for some people it may just be putting food on the table.
And we've heard this over and over again, that the key here is to have trusted community members doing the outreach, doing the vaccination themselves, which is where I Grow Chicago comes in. That's a multifaceted organization. It has a community garden. It treats traumatized youth. And they are administering their own vaccine clinics because folks know and trust them on the block and in the blocks surrounding it. And the other challenge they help solve is access, especially since many community members find it hard to hop on public transit to go to one of the mass vaccination sites, say at the United Center or Chicago State University.
They're so appreciative of this being offered over here. One lady came up to me and she said, I didn't think I was going to ever be able to get this vaccine. Because she can't travel downtown, she can't travel other places and things like that. We have a lot of seniors over here, so this is more accessible for them to be able to come here, go in, get the vaccine, and make themselves safe.
So it's an all-hands-on-deck approach by the many community organizations like I Grow, and it's been an all-hands-on-deck approach in Englewood for many, many years to deal with the other problems here of disinvestment, of poverty, of access to health care, of violence. And there are organizations like Teamwork Englewood that are on the ground, they say, trying to develop what they call the most valuable resource in this community, and that is the community's youth.
We definitely need more focus on not to see our young people, to criminalizing of our young people, but to have a restorative, a human approach to helping them. We need resources, not just sports activity, but we need a comprehensive approach to our youth development initiatives. We need to deal with the intellectual component. We need to deal with the technological component of developing our young people, as well as giving them culture awareness.
And we're going to get a little more into these issues of community and policing and trust in police, especially among the community's youth. But again, those walk-in appointments, those are going to be very valuable here in Englewood, as officials hope to get that rate up here and in other underserved communities. And we'll be back with the area's alderman in just a bit to talk about this and a lot more. But Brandis, now we toss it back to you.
Yeah, Paris, thanks. We'll see you in a bit. It's Earth Day. In Washington, President Joe Biden pledged to world leaders that the U.S. will cut the nation's greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030. Part of that relies on a transition to electric vehicles. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda.
Brandis, another presidential promise. Biden, via executive order, wants the nation's fleet, so that would include vehicles like mail trucks, to be clean and green. It's not just the White House that is looking to reduce gas guzzlers on streets and on highways. Governor J.B. Pritzker today also signing an executive order, this one requiring that future state leasing and purchasing of vehicles be for low or zero emission vehicles. Now, electric cars are not the default yet.
Is it happening today? No. But, we see a better understanding growing. We see more and more models being introduced, and we see a lot of policy supporting it. Like, states like Massachusetts and California have banned the sale of internal combustion engines after 2035. You have seen car manufacturers like General Motors also say that they're not going to manufacture any internal combustion engines after the same date. So there's definitely a trend towards that.
Right now, however, there are some bumps in the road. The Environmental Law and Policy Center's Susan Mudd says some of that will clear up as electric cars are normalized.
We're all used to driving to gas stations, but people aren't used to thinking about plugging in their car overnight in their garage or in front of their house or in front of their apartment building. As more of these are literally seen, people will understand that it's not really such a huge change.
It is a change, but she says a minor one, and one way to clear the coast for that, more charging stations. President Biden also has a promise there, promising 500,000 charging stations going up across the country.
This will both allow drivers to plug in, but it also will relieve one of the major problems right now that we have for electric vehicles, which is range anxiety. People are afraid, even who want or already own an electric vehicle, that they're not sure they can get to where they need to go because they're not sure that at the other end of their trip, there'll be someplace to charge up their car.
Just a bit ago, we met Meg Houghton. That is exactly what the company she works for, EV Box, does. It makes charging stations, and they are manufactured in the Netherlands, but also in suburban Libertyville. I asked her, are these charging stations used in Illinois?
We hope so. We hope that more of these chargers are used in Illinois. We're bringing state-of-art technology here. We're manufacturing super fast chargers, 350 kilowatt chargers. Illinois currently has almost 2,000 charging ports or so needs to maybe install a lot more.
A whole lot more in order to make good on those 2030 goals. Of the 4.5 million total cars driven in Illinois, only about 27,000, she says, are electric. But the goal to have 750,000 electric vehicles in Illinois by the year 2030. And Megha says that means Illinois would need about 98,000 more charging ports within the decade. Now, Daniel Horton is a climate scientist, and he's focused on solution-oriented approaches to solving what he describes as the climate crisis.
About 17% of the U.S. greenhouse gas emissions come from the transportation sector. And so a natural remedy would be to stop emitting CO2 while we get ourselves around via vehicles.
Now, one of the models that he did showed that if a quarter of drivers of light duty, so just normal cars, converted to electric vehicles, the U.S. would save 250 gigatons, yeah, that's a term, of carbon emissions. He says from a climate and carbon perspective, the adoption of electric vehicles is a no-brainer.
If we adopt electric vehicles, our carbon emissions will go down. They'll still exist in the form of fossil fuel-based electricity generation, but it'll be much lesser than the individual vehicles that people drive today.
Horton says there's another benefit too.
So in addition to emitting CO2, your internal combustion engine vehicle can emit particulate matter or other pollutants that eventually can be harmful to breathing. And so the removal of those pollutants from the tailpipes of your vehicle can have significant health benefits to society.
And so while we've thus far focused on personal cars, efforts are also afoot for that transition in the public transit arena. Earlier this month, the CTA debuted new electric buses, and the ELPC's Susan Mudd says these are quieter and cleaner. They've got these buses going on the Chicago Avenue, Route 66, that goes from Navy Pier to the west side.
It goes all the way to the west side of Chicago, to neighborhoods, frankly, that have more air pollution and more health problems and more historic impact from air pollution.
Now, meanwhile, Illinois does have money that is set aside from a few years back, that Volkswagen diesel emissions settlement. And that money is supposed to be used to help to purchase the more expensive electric school buses. Now, so far, really only a handful have been purchased. You've got 3 that are driving around being used in the Chicago area, but Mudd says $10 million that has to be used towards something along these lines is still sitting, well, idle in a fund. And advocates are frustrated that the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency hasn't spent that money to buy more electric school buses. I did reach out to the state EPA and got no real answer as to why that has stalled. By the way, this transition to electric vehicles, as we noted, there is legislation before the Illinois General Assembly, and not everybody is on board with that. Really no surprise. Gas station owners have concerns, but also one of these measures would require charging ports in new residential construction building, and that's something that the Home Builders Association of Illinois is against. So, Brandis, happy Earth Day, back to you.
Happy Earth Day to you as well, Amanda. Thank you. And now to Phil Ponce and new scientific research raising ethical concerns. Phil.
Brandis, for the first time, scientists have successfully been able to grow monkey embryos containing human cells. Researchers at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies in California, working in collaboration with Chinese scientists, grew the embryos in a dish with some surviving up to 20 days. They published their research last week, immediately igniting debate over the ethics of such research and sparking fears of human-monkey hybrids. Joining us now to help us understand the reality behind the unsettling headlines is In-Soo Hyun, professor of bioethics and philosophy at Case Western Reserve University in Ohio and the director of research ethics at Harvard Medical School. Hyun is also involved in developing guidelines to govern this type of research. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. And before we get into the issue of whether or not this is a good or a bad thing, explain just like mechanically what it is these scientists did.
That's right, thank you. So they took sperm and eggs from monkeys, mixed them in a dish to make monkey embryos. And these embryos, as you must know, have never been in a monkey's body. They were created in a lab in a dish. Once those monkey embryos got to just a few days old, at the pre-implantation stage, they transferred about 25 human stem cells, injected them into these embryos, and watched how these stem cells interacted with the monkey cells for about up to 20 days.
And we're looking at an image of that embryo, and the red dots are the human genetic material that is in the embryo. But please continue.
Right, I'm glad you're showing this image because many people, when they first heard of this experiment, had images of Planet of the Apes in their minds, right? They had images of human-monkey hybrids that are somehow visually a mixture of the two species. But really what you see here is the extent to which these embryos were grown. They look like mini disco balls. They look nothing like an animal. And so this is because they used the embryos at a pre-implantation stage before they got complex and formed structures like limbs or organs. Now, why did they do this? Many people are curious about why science would do such a radical thing. To answer that question, we have to get to really what is the ultimate purpose of this kind of experiment?
What is the ultimate purpose?
The ultimate purpose is to learn how to better get to the point where we can grow transplantable human organs in livestock animals like sheep or pigs. There is a drastic shortage of organs for transplantation in the United States and worldwide. In fact, in the United States, about 18 people every day die while waiting for an organ on the organ wait list. So there has to be radical strategies to ease that shortage and to help save American lives. So the strategy of growing human organs in a livestock animal, which is evolutionarily very distant from human, right? Pigs and sheep are very, very unlike human beings. That strategy has not worked because injecting human stem cells into a pig or sheep embryo that's been genetically modified to lack an organ, which then the human stem cells will provide. Those human stem cells have not survived for very long in that foreign host environment. So researchers have to have a better understanding of how to overcome what's called the xenobarrier, the barrier between human species and non-human species. And to better learn that, we have to work with a species that's much closer to human beings, which would be the monkey.
Professor,
the monkey embryos could learn about how human cells can interact with non-human cells at a very early stage before implantation.
Professor, as we mentioned, these embryos with these monkey embryos with the injected human material only lasted about 20 days. If it lasts, is it the goal for it to last longer? And at that point, might not society get into more troubling aspects than just trying to figure out how cells talk to each other to promote transplantation?
Right. That's an excellent question. The reason why they track the embryos for 20 days is that's the maximum limit of how long technologically you can keep monkey embryos alive in a dish that have never been in a monkey body. So what you would have to do to go any further beyond that point is to implant the embryo into a uterus of a monkey. Now, nobody wants to do that at this point.
Might that happen? Might that happen, though? It seems as if this might be a preparatory step for the implantation of that embryo into a macaque monkey, which is the material that the macaque monkey is the one that's been providing this material.
That's right. That's right. Well, certainly you're correct that if the goal is to grow human organs in sheep and pigs, then those sheep and pig embryos of human cells would be transplanted into a uterus and brought to full term. That's correct, because you have to have a living adult animal to provide the organ for transplant. But for the monkey work, nobody wants to grow human organs in a little monkey. In fact, that human organ would be way too small to be of any good. So there's no point in gestating the monkey embryo. You just want to study cell-to-cell communication, and you can answer that research question without implantation. So I would draw the line right now at implantation. You can study the embryo in the dish in that disco ball format, but implantation and pregnancy of a monkey embryo that has human cells, that's a lot more troubling, and nobody wants to do that. That's not scientifically justified for the purpose of growing organs in sheep and pigs.
But if something can be done, is there a possibility that some scientists might go rogue and do something that could result in a creature that has some component of human consciousness?
That's right. That is obviously a concern for everybody. And there are no guarantees, right? Even if we have strict rules and laws, people can always break them. People have been known to break rules in science. But the public needs to know that there is a pretty rigorous structure in place, both for animal research full stop, and also for research involving human stem cells at the international level. So even if the Salk team worked with researchers in China, which have expertise in making monkey embryos and culturing them for 20 days, both research teams had to get institutional approval at their Chinese and California institutions, but also had to follow international laws and rules for animal research on the one hand, and the international guidelines for stem cell research. So there really is all efforts made to have clear guidance on this kind of work, understanding that there's quite a bit of controversy in this type of research. But anytime you have any type of law, laws do not actually 100% prevent bad behavior. Regarding the scientists that might go rogue and do this, I wouldn't even call them scientists, because there's no scientific reason to gestate a human chimera in a monkey model. without a clear plan as to what the benefit to society is for doing that.
Professor Heon, thank you so much for your insights. Fascinating story. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And up next, details on a new push to roll out COVID vaccines, so please stay with us.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
And now we go back to Paris Schutz, who spent the day reporting in Greater Englewood area as a part of our In Your Neighborhood series. Paris.
Yeah, Brandis, we're back here with 24th Ward Alderman Jeanette Taylor. Alderman, thanks. Alderwoman, I should say, thank you so much for joining us.
You're more than welcome.
We were talking to a bunch of providers about trying to get that vaccination rate up. One of the things they say is, folks, they're worried about a lot of things here. Maybe COVID isn't the top of mind. So are you happy with the efforts to get that rate up?
No, because think about this. The testing wasn't even that great in communities of color. And so with them coming out saying that the Johnson & Johnson now has problems, and I got the Johnson & Johnson, people are scared. There's always this thing in our communities about trusting the government. We don't trust government. We know what they tested on black folks before. So they have to clear up a lot of those things that people are scared of, and they got to make it accessible. Using our neighborhood colleges, the churches, it needs to be so in your face that you take the time to say, I'm just going to go get tested or I'm going to go get the vaccination.
So you don't think that's happening yet? I mean, enough residents are getting the message to come out and get
I don't think so.
What needs to happen?
We got to go to old school door knocking and use those relationships. Why do we have those relationships? We know the people in the church. We know the young lady on the corner selling water. We know the young children that run back and forth and play in the playground. It's having those conversations with family about it's not enough for one person to get vaccinated or just to wear your mask, but we also have to look at people's living conditions. We got a bunch of folks who are lived on top of each other. They're homeless. We got a large population of homeless youth in the community. That's 16 group. And so we got to do a good job of getting people who they respect and they listen to do that. So if that's Snapchat and Instagram, they hate Facebook now. That's not their thing. Oh. So we got to get people who they listen to. We got to get their peers to actually say to him, hey, it's worth listening to get vaccinated, and actually letting them, decide. Right. I'm not pushing my 16-year-old to get vaccinated. As a matter of fact, he's not even going to the school. They didn't keep the schools clean before COVID. You think I'm gonna send him now?
All right,
no.
So a lot to think about there. I want to move on to other issues. Police oversight, there's the GAPA and CPAC ordinance. It's merged into one to have a civilian police board. The mayor has not put forth her proposal. So what's going on with the proposal?
We don't have a progressive mayor. The chair of the City Council of Safety Committee is not progressive. We're going to expect the police to police the police. That is Alderman Taliaferro. We continue not to even want to have the conversations, and that's problematic, and that's why we are not moving as a city. Think about this. In every major city in the country who's had police violence, they've done ordinances to move forward, and Chicago is still thinking about it. We still ain't got the consent decree.
You think?
Because the police run this city. Let's say what it is.
So you're saying
what did Lori do before she got this job? Wait, she was a cop, wasn't she?
No, she was on the police reform committee put together by the mayor.
Police to police to police. It has not worked, and in communities of colors, it is just horrible. We cannot continue not to do anything.
So
Look what's happening.
But that ordinance has majority support of your colleagues. So how come it's not called for a vote or anything?
You want to call Lori and ask her? You can call Taliaferro and ask him as well. They are keeping this. We want to have this change. This is long overdue. We've been talking about police oversight
and this board would would have the power to hire and fire the superintendent.
Oh, most definitely. And think about this. While I have mad respect for Superintendent Brown, he from Texas. He not from Chicago. So you got to be born and bred in here to understand the dynamics of Chicago. You got to be able to understand neighborhoods and relationships. He just doesn't.
All right, Alderman Taylor. That's all the time we have. That went by really fast, but thank you very much for being here. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And Brandis, we toss it back to you. We'll be back here in a second.
Not one to mince words, is she, Paris? Thank you. Still to come on Chicago Tonight. The city is accepting design proposals for Chicago's first ever casino. Details on what the plans must include. A relative of Emmett Till gives his perspective on George Floyd's death and the guilty verdict in Derek Chauvin's trial. Jeffrey Baer on a soaring South Side bridge that carries the CTA's Green Line in tonight's all-new Ask Jeffrey. And your last chance to see an outdoor art exhibit in Greektown that combines mythology and current events. But first, some more of today's top stories. It's been a year on the job for Chicago's top cop, David Brown. Today, he took questions from reporters addressing the city's crime, police shootings, and looking back on this year. He says he is determined and committed to continue doing his job and says the two things that keep him up are the safety of the community as well as the wellness of his officers.
We have to have officers who are well to be able to do the job in the ways this city deserves. Officers, as you know, have high rates of suicide in this department, as well as the high incidence of being shot at or shot these last 2 years. It's extraordinary, unprecedented, beyond any other particular year on record.
And there's much more on Brown's job, his first year on the job, on our website. The family of Dante Wright laid the 20-year-old to rest today. Wright was shot to death by a Brooklyn Center police officer just outside Minneapolis almost 2 weeks ago.
When he walked in the room, he lit up the room. He was a brother, a jokester. He was loved by so many. He's going to be so missed.
The Wright family was joined by family members of other Black people who'd been killed by police, including George Floyd, but also Philando Castile, Eric Garner, and Breonna Taylor. The former officer who shot the father of one is facing second-degree manslaughter charges. Mayor Lightfoot has officially begun the bidding process for Chicago's first casino. She made the announcement in a video today. Take a look.
We're excited to have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create a world-class integrated casino resort that will complement Chicago's already booming, thriving entertainment and cultural scene.
Key words there, casino resort. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more details. So Heather, the mayor is now accepting design proposals for the city's first ever casino. What does the mayor want to see in these designs?
Well, this casino is going to be much more than slot machines as the way the mayor is envisioning it. It will not only include a hotel of about 500 rooms, but it should include restaurants, it should include bars, it should include event space, it should include a concert hall. So the mayor sees this as a way to jumpstart the city's recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, while at the same time raising about $200 million annually that is already earmarked for the city's police and fire pensions.
So when are these proposals due, and when can we expect a winner to be announced?
Well, they're due in August. A winner is unlikely to be announced by 2022, and whatever firm is the mayor's pick will have to meet a host of requirements, including setting aside a significant portion of the contracts for firms owned by Black and Latino owners, as well as women. So we probably won't see construction on a casino until 2024, and it probably won't open until 2025, but there's a chance that a temporary casino could open in the meantime. So we'll all be able to get our slot machine time in closer to home.
Yeah, well, we're all taking bets on when this is actually going to happen. Heather Sharon, thanks so much for joining us.
That is the big question.
Absolutely. And you can read Heather's full story on our website. That's WTTW.com/news. It's been more than 65 years since 14-year-old Emmett Till, a Black Chicagoan visiting family in Mississippi, was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered by two white men who went unpunished. The brutal nature of Till's death, exposed by his mother's decision for an open casket funeral in 1955, helped galvanize the civil rights movement. This week, George Floyd's brother invoked Emmett Till's name while discussing the Derek Chauvin trial.
To me, Emmett Till, he was the first George Floyd. It just wasn't any cameras around. That's the only thing that changed, the cameras, the technology. It helped open up doors, because without that, my brother just would have been another person on the side of the road, left to die.
And joining us to provide his perspective is Emmett Till's cousin and the last surviving witness of Till's abduction, Reverend Wheeler Parker. Reverend Parker, thank you so much for joining us. What was your reaction a few days ago when the verdict was read in Derek Chauvin's trial?
If I had to use one word, unbelievable.
Why unbelievable?
When you live in a system and you have the experiences that I've had, and you know what the spirit of the country is, and for this to come out like that, it's just like they say, there's two laws, especially when it comes to blacks and whites. We know there's two sets of books, as we say, and for the jury to come forth with guilty on all charges, and it was about as unbelievable as last year when they had the diversifying in the protests. That was unbelievable as well. Things are really changing fast for the old man, and I'm not accustomed to things changing and happening that fast. I know the wheels of justice grind, but they grind very slow.
What does it say to you that so many black people were surprised by that verdict?
It tells me that it really shows how much progress we've made. And we've made a lot of progress. The young people can't see it and don't understand it, because if you didn't live in the South in the 50s and the 40s, you have no idea what it was like. So they can't see a big change because they see the spirit that was just magnified during the last presidential and the last few years. And they just said we haven't changed that much, but we've changed. So it says to me that there's hope.
George Floyd's brother, PHILONISE Floyd, his immediate reaction following the verdict, as we said, was to invoke your cousin, Emmett Till, calling him the first George Floyd. Some might say there have been many in between, but how do you see it?
I see it, I could concur with him because, of course, when I heard and saw what happened to him, I thought about Emmett Till right away. The spirit of the country, that spirit is still out there. It hasn't gone anywhere either, so we got a lot of work to do. And I concur with him. Emmett's story, he was not the first one, but his story was the first that went viral. It went all over the world. It's like an idea whose time has come. And it seemed like God used that time to help hasten things or to start people to thinking and standing up and moving in the right way. It definitely had a boost, definitely did what it was supposed to do.
Of course, in the case of Emmett Till, the two white men who were accused of killing him, they went unpunished, even though they admitted to it in Life magazine a bit after his death. In this instance, the accused killer has been convicted. Do you see big differences between these two cases?
Like I said, we've made progress. In the Emmett Till case, one thing you have to admit, too, I think that was the first time ever that a white person was put on trial for doing something to a black person. That was progress for that time. That's 65 years ago, but that was progress in that they had a trial. And then here in George Floyd's case, we got a conviction. And we were surprised by it. And there have always been people of diversity. When blacks made progress or have been successful, there were always people, I tell black people this all the time, of diversity that had the fire in their belly to stand up and do what's right. And that's what it's going to take to go forward, to be successful. And I see people are standing. As Emmett Till said, people stood up that never stood up before.
How did his mother, Mamie Till, how did she sort of channel her energy after Emmett Till died?
Good question. And I think we don't know that because we don't talk about it. But she was hurt and looked bitter and a little angry. But she took that lemon and made lemonade. She went to the Supreme Court. She did all the channels she could. Then she started helping people. She got busy serving humanity. We are put here to serve. She formed the Emmett Till Players along with her mother, and she developed their oratorical skills by having them quoting Martin Luther King's speeches. And she went all over doing it, a busy lady. And there's a documentary back in 1985. If you listen to her, She's had pity for those who had killed her husband, not her husband, her son. She didn't carry hate because hate destroys the hater. She took that hate and she transformed it into something positive. Because I always tell people where I go, hate destroys it. I can't afford the luxury of hate. Can't afford it.
And Reverend Parker, before we let you go, of course, this verdict does not put an end to racial injustice. How do you think the movement against injustice should move forward?
I think I always tell people, how did we get to where we are? Look at how we got here and the things we did. Let's be patient and let's keep doing the same thing. If you get impatient, you're going to take the law into your own hands. And when you take the law into your own hands, that's what some people want you to do. You're going to be a loser. A friend of mine said his daddy told his son was going to go plead his mother's case. Someone had taken and misused, disrespected her. He said, I'm going to straighten it out. He said, son, it's going to change. But what you're fixing to do, you're not going to be here to see the change. Sometimes people want you to get violent so they can get violent with you, and you're going to be a loser in most cases. So
it's all about how you respond to the situation that you're in, as we've discussed earlier. That's unfortunately where we'll have to leave it. It's an honor to have you, Reverend Wheeler Parker. Thank you so much for joining us.
God bless you all. Have a great day and wish you the best.
Up next, we check in with Paris Schutz, who's live tonight from Chicago's greater Englewood area. But first, a look at the weather.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part through the generous support of the Julius Frankel Foundation.
And now we check back in with Paris Schutz, who spent the day reporting in the greater Englewood area as part of our In Your Neighborhood series, and he's there now with a community leader. Paris.
Yeah, Brandis, we're here with Asia Butler, head of the Resident Association of Greater Englewood, or RAGE. Asia, great to see you again. So you heard Alderman Taylor before saying to get those vaccination rates up, you need trusted community people, churches, organizations like yours, getting the word out to people. How's that going right now?
Yeah, it's been difficult even for RAGE. You know, we have a mix of residents, and so everybody has different feelings about the vaccination. Some people are gung-ho, ready to go and get it, and some people are very hesitant. So as an organization, we really couldn't take an official stance, but we definitely promote when we know the vaccinations are happening in Englewood.
And you know, with COVID, all these other issues that compound in Englewood, like rent, there's an eviction moratorium right now. If that ever gets lifted, how's that going to impact Englewood residents?
Yeah, you know, I was talking about that earlier today. You know, we only have 25% of homeowners here in Englewood, so a lot of our residents are actually renters. And so if the landlord decides to pull the plug or property managers decide to take action immediately, that can affect a huge population of our community, which is why we do a lot of work around trying to get renters to become homeowners so that they can have a little bit more control. Especially with the eviction process or with the moratorium being lifted. And right now, there is just an uncertainty, and everything in the last year has just been uncertainty.
Do you think residents here have been successful in getting some of the aid that's been available for rent to just try to keep up?
Yeah, they have. I mean, we send it out as much as we can anytime we get information, but you also have to realize it's a digital divide. So when you start talking about all the inequities of certain communities, the health inequity, the digital divide here, a lot of folks are not online. They're not able to get online and fill out an application for rental assistance. So you really have to meet people where they are, which is why our aldermen and local groups like RAGE are really important for residents who are not very, savvy on the net, and our bandwidth here is not the best, and so all that plays a factor.
So boots on the ground really is the key for
it
all
really
this stuff.
does,
vaccination,
everything.
Rental assistance. And then, the other side, you said 25% homeowners.
Yeah.
And you own a property, right? So if you're not getting rent, how about for the homeowners or the property owners? Is that hurting them?
It's tough. I mean, I had tenants who fell behind on rent, and being a private landlord, we're able to kind of talk and come to a resolution and do payment arrangements. And I can also offer, rental assistance that I know about. every landlord is not like myself. You know, some of them are managed by property management companies who they're ready for evictions the minute that you lose, you not pay rent on the first. And I've seen it happen being in eviction court where people are very aggressive. And Englewood is vulnerable. And right now this is a very vulnerable time. And our renters and our residents are going through a lot of vulnerability. And some people are going to take advantage of it, and it's unfortunate.
All right, before we go, in a bit, Jeffrey Bayer is going to talk about Go Green on Racine, which is a project that you're heavily involved in here in Englewood. Tell us about that.
Yes, Go Green on Racine, a very grassroots, comprehensive corridor revitalization project. It's looking at a vacant school that's over there on 63rd and Racine, an abandoned train stop on 63rd and Racine, and also the rest of the abandonment that's over there in that corridor that, you know, the city and everybody else just seems to ignore. We're not ignoring it. We're breathing life into it, and we're trying to get a green light on the green line and get that stop open on 63rd and Racine.
All right. Well, best of luck with that. We're going to hear more about that in just a second from Jeffrey Bayer. But now that wraps up our work here in Englewood. Brandis, we toss it back to you.
Paris, thanks. And as always, my best to Mrs. Englewood, who you have there with you. Up next, details on a CTA train bridge, as Paris just mentioned in this week's Ask Jeffrey. Stay with us.
Ask Jeffrey is brought to you in part by BMO Harris Bank.
Wow, you ready?
Yeah, let me just grab my wallet.
Uh-oh, I've seen this before. Wallet way too big, skinny jeans too skinny.
I'll just carry it.
Before you break something, you should know you don't actually need a wallet. With BMO Harris, you can just take cash out with your phone. Or if you need to, you can pay them with Zelle. That works? Yeah. You're stuck, aren't you? Smile. Woo! Those jeans are way too tight.
That feeling you get when no wallet is no big deal. That's the BMO effect.
On Chicago's South Side, there's a bridge spanning the Dan Ryan that looks more like a Disney World monorail than part of a working CTA train line. Jeffrey Bayer is here with the bridge's history and what it can tell us about the development of Chicago's neighborhoods in this week's Ask Jeffrey. Hey there, Jeffrey.
Hi, Brandis.
So this question is, what was the status of the Englewood branch of the now called Green Line during the construction of the Dan Ryan? Was the structure that currently spans the Ryan removed and reconstructed?
Okay, well, at first this might sound like an obscure question just for L-train nerds like me, but if you've ever driven on the Dan Ryan, it's likely that you do actually know what our viewer, Donald, is asking about. So let's take a look. At about 59th Street, just north of where the Skyway splits off from the Ryan, you pass beneath a bridge that carries the Green Line L way, way up in the air. In fact, if you're riding on the Green Line train at that spot and you look down at the Ryan, you almost feel like you're flying in an airplane. So what's the story? Well, let's go back to when the branch was built. Back then, of course, the expressway did not exist. When construction started on the Dan Ryan in the mid-1950s, the question became, well, how do you keep the train running while at the same time digging a really wide, really deep trench underneath that L structure for the future highway, which was going to be sunken below grade? So to accomplish this, the CTA constructed a second bridge and put the whole L structure on top of it, the 1907 tracks, so that the crew could excavate below that. In the words of CTA historian Graham Garfield, it was a bridge on top of a bridge, and remnants of that can still be seen today when you're on the Ryan. In this way, the train didn't have to be halted, and neither did construction. Again, this is part of what is known today as the Englewood or Ashland branch of the Green Line. We used to call it the Englewood branch, used to be called the South Side Elevated. The branch's construction began in 1905 as an extension of the South Side Elevated, which opened in 1892. That was long before the city's elevated trains were consolidated into what we now call the CTA. In fact, that old South Side Elevated, today's Green Line, is the oldest line in the city. All right, so now, more than a half a century later, the city used eminent domain and bulldozed a wide strip of homes and apartment buildings on the south side to build the Dan Ryan. Many of those residences were owned or rented by Black Chicagoans. And the gap basically created a 14-lane divide between mostly white neighborhoods like Bridgeport to the west and Chicago's so-called Black Belt to the east. But I should note that even before the Ryan was constructed, the Englewood neighborhood, which is today west of the Ryan and is served by the branch of the L that we're talking about, was already changing from nearly 100% white to nearly all African American as part of white flight.
So, Jeffrey, the city managed to keep the trains running even during construction of the Ryan, but you said that that was the city's oldest L line, so surely it's had to be entirely refurbished, correct?
Well, it absolutely has. And that happened in the mid-1990s. The line was almost totally rebuilt. And this time, the CTA did not keep the trains running. To accomplish the job in the shortest time possible, the entire line, people might remember this, from the south side all the way west to Oak Park, was shut down for 2 whole years. And the decision was felt for years after that. Several stops were closed permanently, and this was on top of other closures in years prior. In this photo, actually, you can see the old Wentworth station that was right at the train bridge that we've been talking about. It was shuttered in 1992. Now, the most recent CTA upgrades have taken a whole different approach. The ongoing Red Purple Line modernization project has closed stations and tracks for brief periods, but it has never suspended service entirely. And in fact, next month, the CTA is going to open temporary stations in Edgewater and Uptown, while 4 stations in those neighborhoods are closed for construction.
And today, though, there are ongoing efforts to reopen one of those closed Green Line stations, correct?
That is right. Several community organizations are advocating to reopen the shuttered Green Line station at Racine and 63rd. This is right in the middle of Englewood. It's part of the Go Green on Racine development. The project is working to revitalize the entire intersection right in the heart of the neighborhood. They're converting an old corner store into a fresh produce market. They're turning a shuttered Chicago public school into a housing and resource center, I should say, for people returning from incarceration. And organizations like Rage Englewood and the Inner City Muslim Action Network envision the reopened L station as a way to improve neighborhood walkability, anchor local businesses, and rebuild the local economy.
Go green on Racine. I get it. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Sure thing.
And don't forget that you can visit our website for more details about the bridge over the Dan Ryan. And while you're there, don't forget to submit your own question to Jeffrey Bear. That's at WTTW.com/AskJeffrey. Amid the coronavirus pandemic and its economic impact, Chicago's Greektown is finding new ways to bring foot traffic to the community. The neighborhood has an outdoor art exhibit designed to brighten the streets and help increase business for local restaurants. Paris Schutz recently brought us this story. Here's another look.
From Van Buren to Monroe, nearly a dozen 5-foot fish sculptures line Greektown's busy Halsted Street. The art pieces are part of the community's Fanciful Fish outdoor exhibit, which was created with families in mind. Eve Moran is chair of the Greektown Arts Committee. She says fish creations were chosen because children could easily identify them.
Fish were also part of the ancient diet in Greece, because Greece is a country surrounded by waters.
Every winter, Greektown's Special Service Area installs an outdoor art exhibit for residents and visitors to observe. This year, amid the coronavirus pandemic, the exhibit has new meaning.
I think it had a lot of relevance because people could not go to art galleries. People couldn't go to museums. Everything was sporadically. There were these ebbs and flows of what was open and what wasn't open. And here was a safe outdoor way for people to enjoy the art and be uplifted.
Professional and emerging Chicago artists alike painted the sculptures. It's a process that began last spring during the stay-at-home order. Logan Square-based artist Juan Cano used his signature shattered glass technique on one side of his sculpture.
I have Poseidon, and he's overlooking an iconic church from Santorini, Greece.
On the other side, Cano did a traditional painting of Santorini, Greece. He says creating the art piece provided an escape from the uncertainty of last spring.
It gives you an outlet to get away and to distract yourself from, the current situation, which was the beginning of COVID, what was going to happen, people are losing their jobs, the uncertainty,
Some artists, like Cano, centered their works around Greek mythology, while others pulled from current issues, like water conservation and the pandemic.
Usually my Greek school, we do it all as a school, but this year, sadly, because of COVID, we couldn't all be together, so I was selected to paint it.
Nicoletta Rencelos is a 7th grader at Coonley Elementary School. She painted the word love in more than 24 languages on the sculpture.
I really wanted to spread a message of love, and now in quarantine, it's really hard to remember and to find joy and stuff.
Many of the sculptures sit outside restaurants, essential businesses in Greektown that have been hit hard by the pandemic, especially without tourism to the area. Artists hope the exhibit can help bring more patrons.
I want to see more people coming back to Greektown. I'd love to see them joining us and ordering takeout.
Yanni Theoharis is the owner of 9 Muses and Melly Cafe. He says he welcomes the artwork. He too hopes the exhibit brings more foot traffic and business to the area.
Oh, it's beautiful. You know, don't forget, Greeks introduced the art. We suffer a lot. The restaurants everywhere, not only in Illinois, everywhere. So we appreciate whatever can be done to bring more people down.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Paris Schutz.
And the exhibit runs through the end of the month, and there's more information on our website. And that's our show for this Thursday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can also get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
And you can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7 for the Weekend Review.
Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz outside Kennedy King College here. Have a great night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that is proud of its partners named Illinois Leading Lawyers by the Law Bulletin Publishing Company of Chicago.